Thanks. Yeah, we're finally worked our way back home here in the Chehalem Mountains to our Raptor Ridge Estate Vineyard, also known as Tuscowallame Vineyard. More on that in a minute. We are on the northern and eastern slopes of the Chehalem Mountain. Our estate winery is over my shoulder, and I'm here in Block 1. Block 1 is the first thing we planted, so that this guy's 20-year-old vines now. They're getting a decent amount of girth on them. What we have done with Block 1 is converted it to that Scott Henry system that I've talked about in previous videos. This is where we've got a fruiting cane that we've trained up to the high wire, and the traditional double guillot on the lower fruiting wire. This block is what's going into our bubbles. So 100% Pinot Noir. We've got 2 clones here in Block 1, Vadensville and clone 115, about evenly split in 1 acre. So by trellising this way, we get a lot more crop per vine, and it slows the ripening down tremendously and allows us to get that nice acid vein and freshness and develop ripeness while keeping the alcohol low and the freshness high. Perfect for bubbles. So this will be our bubbles block. It's gone into our blend with Harbinger Vineyard for the last couple of years. We are located about 20 miles outside of Portland, back through the Tualatin River Valley, over those hills. So we get a tremendous amount of wind and weather coming down the Columbia Gorge, rushing over those hills and washing over us here in the northern Chehalem Mountains. So the important part about our aspect, looking to the northeast here, up the Columbia Gorge, this is where the Missoula floods entered the Willamette Valley. They carved out the Columbia River Gorge and washed into the present-day Willamette Valley, depositing all of that silt and tumbling tremendous amounts of granite rock, crushing it into a talcum powder like rock flour called loess. And that loess was washed and blown up onto the slopes here in the Chehalem Mountains. Loess on top of ancient volcano jori soil. That combination is called laurelwood. And in fact, that is a proposed new AVA, American Viticultural Region, that about 2/3 of the Chehalem Mountain would be classified as if it goes through. But that it's a hybrid type soil. It's neither volcanic nor is it sedimentary. It's a combination, and I think that gives some of the amazing fruit characteristics a unique signature here. So what is that fruit signature? I think it's a classic Italian plum. Pinot Noir typically is described in red fruit characteristics, whether that's cherry, or sometimes it gets a little darker into blackberry or a full blueberry. From the estate site here, it's more of a rich Italian plum stone fruit, ample tannins, but the tannins are they're powerful, but they're softened. They're almost melted. And invariably, the selections that I make with Shannon on creating our estate tend to come from our Pommard blocks. Not exclusively, but there's a high component of what we end up choosing after blind tasting that comes right from here. Block 5 or Block 9 right next to it. Kind of midway on the hill in that laurelwood soil, and Pommard clone. So this is grafted vines. We spent the better part of a winter getting the budwood, Pommard European varietal, and grafting it onto American rootstock, growing it up in a greenhouse, and planting these babies. Block 5 was the second planting we did. That was probably around 2003. So these are still teenagers, but the roots are getting down. They're going through that profile of Los on top of Jory and starting to get some complexity and some real personality. So we like making Pinot Noir from all of these blocks. I've basically have 12 different blocks of Pinot Noir and a 13th of Gruner Veltliner. Nisi Pie, come on, let's go down, see the Gruner. It's hard to lose a Labrador, but we'll get her back here soon. Okay, I finally got my sidekick, Anise, to come with me as we head down to the Gruner block. But it gives me another chance to talk about one of our sustainability practices. We use nothing synthetic in the vineyard, and that includes how we pay attention to soil and vine nutrition. Every year, in multiple different ways, I'm measuring the nutrient level of the soil, as well as how much of that is making it into the leaf, and then finally into the grape and the grape juice. And we practice a way of growing our own, principally nitrogen, but also phosphorus, called cover cropping. And I'll plant in the fall. Every other row will have, like this row is ryegrass with a little bit of clover in it, and the alternate row is got a mixture of buckwheat, a little bit of crimson clover, and some radish. The radish digs deep and breaks up the soil to fight soil compaction, and the other components I spoke of fix nitrogen from the air and into the roots. So midsummer, I'll till this under, and that'll give another dose of nutrients that the vines will take into the fruit that they're putting on the vine for this vintage. Not only that, but when these things are in bloom, it provides nectar for pollinators, provides habitat for beneficial insects, and the beneficials are the little guys that come by and hunt. They hunt after the mites and other insects that we don't want chewing on our vines. It's a beautiful evening here. We just passed the weather and soil monitoring station, so it's another data-driven thing we do to pay attention to heat unit accumulation and water levels in the soil. You see the black pipe we have. So we have the ability to irrigate, but now that the vines are pushing their 20s, they seem to have deep enough roots, and this laurelwood soil we're talking about has a good enough water holding capacity that I haven't used irrigation in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years really. And we've had some terribly hot, dry summers, so I don't know that the black plastic pipe will ever get turned back on again. All right, we're almost down to the Gruner block. So one of the wines you're getting in this Chehalem 3-pack is our Gruner Veltliner, and we made it down to the Gruner Veltliner block. So again, I'm doing the Scott Henry trellising system, putting on about twice the level of crop that you normally would with just a single guillo. So there'll be grape clusters here on the lower fruiting wire, and then grape clusters on the upper fruiting wire. That I have experienced creates a nicely balanced lower sugar, maintain acid and freshness, but it requires a lot of energy, a lot of nutrition from the soil. So I'm doing a lot more clover and vetch. It's pretty this time of year. The crimson clover is almost in its peak. We've got our little bumblebee friend enjoying some of the nectar. So this will fix a tremendous amount of nitrogen that will feed this vintage. Why did I plant Gruner Veltliner? That low soil that I spoke of is the same type of soil that they have in Austria, in the Wachau and some of the finer wine growing regions where I got first introduced to the fine wine of Gruner Veltliner. So when we started to learn more what we have going on here with our low soils, really as an experiment, I thought, well, let's just plant an acre and a half of it. And it's turned out to be one of our most enjoyable wines. I gotta go get the dog. He's chasing the neighbor's horse. Back in a minute. Here comes the neighbor's horses. I usually carry carrots in my pockets. This is Joker. Hello, Joker. Heading over to meet up with Art. The little ram thinks he's one of the horses. So more of that gentle slope. So Nisi and I have made it down to the bottom of the vineyard now. We're at block 8, which is another one of our favorite Pinot blocks when we taste the wines blind. In fact, I think it's Shannon's favorite. She always picks it out, just like I pick out block 5. So this is a 777 clone, one of the Dijon clones. I varied the rootstock so that at the bottom of the vineyard it's on Riparia rootstock, one of the more devigorating rootstocks. It requires more water to produce a given amount of vegetation and crop. I used it at the bottom of the hill because the water drains down here. The soil's thicker down here. That low soil is easily maybe another foot deeper at the bottom of the vineyard than up at the top. We're about 250 feet elevation here. And across the fence line, as you get below 250 or 200, I think that's where the AVA boundary is. You are no longer in the Chehalem Mountains. Here at the fence line, one of the other things we like to do, let's see if I can, yeah, right over my shoulder, you can see this nesting box. So in the forest, just on the other side of the vineyard, we've built a couple of owl nesting boxes. I promised to tell you about Tuscowallame Vineyard. You'll see it on our labels, T-U-S-C-O-W-A-L-L-A-M-E, Tuscowallame. We found that name in a book of Oregon names. The first peoples that populated this valley had a creek that pioneers ended up calling Owl Creek. The name of that area in the Tualatin language was Tuscowallame, the place where the owls dwell. And so now you kind of had the cook's tour of the estate vineyard and kind of what we do to focus on quality. And it's also just a beautiful place to go walk your Labrador. I think she wants to go back and talk with the horses.